Hello and welcome to the first episode of Spencer's Dev Tips. In this episode, we're going to talk about using thread dumps in Java. They're a really useful tool to have in your toolbox. I find myself using them once or twice a week when I'm debugging performance problems in production, and they come in really handy. So we'll spend just a few minutes showing you how to read a thread dump and how to get useful information out of it and how to use it to track down a performance problem in your application. But first off, what is a thread dump? It is a snapshot of your Java process and everything that's going on at a given point in time. So it just tells you when you get the thread dump, it tells you exactly what's going on, including details about every thread and stack traces for every thread, and if that thread is running, and if it's blocked, and if it's blocked, what it's blocked on. So what is it useful for? If your application is slow or completely unresponsive, that thread dump is going to be really handy. You can use it to find deadlocks, where one thread or where two threads are competing for a given resource and can't do anything at all. We're not going to go into that in this episode, but it can be used for that. The most useful thing is, in my experience, the most useful thing it's used for is for debugging slow or hung operations in an environment you don't have direct access to. So for example, if your application is running really slow at one URL in production, you can't reproduce it locally, and you can't attach a debugger to it or anything. If you can reproduce it in that environment, you can have somebody from operations, or if you have access to it, you can get a thread dump and at least get some clues as to where the problem may be happening. So how do you get a thread dump? The way we're going to do it in this demo is using a command line tool called JStack, but if you're using Spring Boot, you can use the Actuator endpoint to get one. Whatever monitoring tools you're using may have ways to get thread dumps. You may be able to get one through JMX. So first of all, let's walk through getting a thread dump. I'm going to simulate a slow query MySQL by clicking this link here, and then we're going to go get a thread dump. So as you can see, this is a page that is hanging. It's going to take about 20 seconds to load. So we want to know why that page is slow. The first thing we need to do is we need to find out the process ID or PID of the Java application that we want to get a thread dump for. So let's do that. And as you can see, if we scroll up a little bit here, the PID for my application is 1558. So I'm going to use a command line tool called JStack, just to show you the options real quick. JStack comes with a JDK, and it prints stack traces for Java processes. You just type JStack and pass in the PID. Occasionally you'll be in a situation where it doesn't want to give you a thread dump, and so you have to do dash uppercase F. That will force it. That usually will get you a thread dump. So if we go here, type in JStack 1558, we see it print out a thread dump for us. To make this a little bit easier to use, I usually send it to a file. We'll just call it tdump.out, and then we'll pop that open and look at it. The first thing you'll notice here is that it's just a text file, and it has the date and a quick description, and then each of these paragraphs or these blocks here are threads. So you can see a whole bunch of Tomcat threads for listening for connections and for doing cleanup. There's a JDBC thread pool cleaner. We keep going down here. There's some NIO threads. There is a lot of internal threads for the JVM for doing compilation and garbage collection. The ones that we're most interested in are these HTTP NIO ones, because those are the ones that are serving your HTTP requests. So let's go back now that we've just seen a sample of that, and let's simulate that slow page again, and let's make sure that we get a thread dump when we do that. So if I go here and click this link again, you'll see it's hanging. It's going to hang for long enough for us to get a thread dump. And if I go here, we'll push it out to a new file. You can see it's still hanging. And so we can go back and look at our thread dump and see if we can trace what our problem is. So if we go into a little bit more detail here, this right here is a thread name. And that comes in handy for knowing what it is you're looking at. Here is the type of thread it is and the priority that it has. And then here is the Java thread ID, and this is the the native thread ID, and then this section here is telling us what state it's in, whether it's runnable or it's waiting or it's blocked, and what condition, if any, it's blocked on. Below that is the actual stack trace, which is really, really handy for finding performance problems or if something is hung or whatever. And you can see right here we got lucky and our thread was at the very top. You may not be so lucky. You may have to do some searching around. For example, my package name is net.uresc.whatever, and so I'll often search for that, and that will at least take me to some candidate threads that have code of mine that's running. It helps me skip all of the internal ones to Java or Tomcat. We can also look at, if we know which controller it is or which job it's running, we can try to narrow down my class name. In this case, I know it's a demo controller, so that helps me find it as well. Another thing that we can do, if you have a lot of threads running and you're not quite sure which one it is, you can get a handful of them over 10 seconds or so. You can do it every few seconds, and you can search for this thread ID here. And when you see one that's the same thread ID and in the exact same state every time, or roughly the same state, that's a pretty good candidate for which one might be the slow one. In this case, like I said, we got really lucky because it's the top one, and it's really easy because I'm the only person connecting to it. But this will still give us something to work with here. As you can see, this is just a normal Java stack trace. The thing at the very top here is a socket read call right here, and that's usually a pretty big clue as to what your problem is, because a lot of times if you have a performance problem in your application, or if something is hung, it's waiting on some external resource like a MySQL database or a web service call or a call to some other system. And so socket read is usually a pretty good tip that this might be our problem. And in this case it is. So if we work our way back here, this is a socket read, and we start getting into some MySQL stuff. Let's try to do some kind of query. We keep tracing back down here, and we get to our controller. This is just a Spring MVC controller, so if we go back over here, you'll see I can go directly to line number, line 22, and you can see it's in our query call right here. And I've kind of cheated and I made it slow on purpose, but as you can see, we've gotten to our problem right here, which is this really slow MySQL query that I made slow on purpose. Anyway, that concludes our walkthrough of how to use a thread dump. If you have any questions, or if there's any comments about this video or anything you want to see in the future, please leave it in the comments or on the blog. Thank you.